Everyone is watching the missiles, everyone is watching the strikes, the diplomatic statements, the military updates, but almost nobody is asking the question that actually matters most to ordinary people around the world. What is this war doing to the global economy? What does it mean for your job, your food, your energy bills, your savings, your future? The answer, when you look at it carefully, is that this war is not just a military conflict between America, Israel, and Iran. It is the trigger for the most significant global economic reorientation in decades, and depending on where you live, depending on which side of this reorientation your country falls on, your life is about to change in ways that most people have not even begun to prepare for. Let me walk you through it, country by country, winner by winner, loser by loser. The foundation: cheap energy is gonna be the first thing you need to understand. The foundation of everything else is this. The entire global economy for the past 40 to 50 years has been built on one single assumption, that cheap energy would always be available, always flowing, always accessible to every nation that needed it. This war is destroying that assumption permanently. The question is no longer whether this will affect the global economy. The question is which nations will be most devastated and which will find a way to survive. And the answer depends entirely on one thing: how dependent is your country on cheap imported energy? The more dependent, the more devastated. The less dependent, the better positioned. Keep that framework in mind as we go through every major economy. Southeast Asia already running out. Start with Southeast Asia, because Southeast Asia is not waiting for the economic impact to arrive. It is already here, today. Thailand and Vietnam are already running out of fuel. Go to a gas station in Bangkok or Ho Chi Minh City right now and there is simply no fuel available. People are being forced to work from home not because they chose to but because they literally cannot fuel their vehicles to get there. Flights are being cancelled. Jet fuel is rationed. Industries that depend on energy, manufacturing, transportation, agriculture, are grinding to a halt. These are economies built entirely around manufacturing and exporting goods to the world. Their factories, supply chains, and transport networks all run on energy. And now that energy is disappearing, this is not a short-term disruption. It is a long-term structural break in the model these nations built their prosperity on. China, most vulnerable long-term. China is the most important economic story of this war. And it is not the story most people expect. On the surface, China looks powerful, the world's second largest economy, a rapidly growing military, expanding global influence. But underneath that surface, China is facing an economic vulnerability that could be more damaging than anything it has faced in decades. China imports approximately 40% of its total energy needs from the GCC. 40%. That is a massive exposure to exactly the supply chain this war is destroying. And China's entire economic model, the model that made it wealthy over the past 30 to 40 years, is built on importing cheap energy and exporting manufactured goods. Cheap energy in, manufactured goods out. That is the entire formula. And this war is dismantling it. China has been trying to transition to a consumer-based, innovation-driven economy for 2 decades. It has not worked. Chinese households are saving rather than spending because ordinary families do not feel optimistic about their economic future. And China's technological bet, artificial intelligence, has a fatal flaw. Training AI models and powering the data centers AI requires consume enormous amounts of energy, the very thing that is disappearing. China can weather this crisis short-term, but long-term, it is the economy least prepared to adapt to a world of expensive energy. America. Best positioned but not without risk. America's situation in this reorientation is very different from almost every other major economy. The Western Hemisphere is extraordinarily wealthy in natural resources. America has oil, gas, coal, agricultural land, fresh water, timber, and minerals. Everything an economy needs to function, America has within its own hemisphere. It does not need to import energy through the Strait of Hormuz. It does not depend on the GCC for its economic survival. Regardless of how this war unfolds, America is best positioned to come through it, not because of its military power, but because of the sheer resource abundance of its own hemisphere. But America is not without risk. It is sitting on $39 trillion in debt sustained by the petrodollar mechanism. The GCC sells oil in US dollars. Every nation that needs Gulf energy must hold dollars to buy it, creating permanent global demand for the currency. and the GCC recycles its earnings back into American financial markets. If this war causes the GCC to abandon the dollar arrangement, America loses the financial mechanism that keeps its entire system alive. A serious risk, not a certainty, but real. Africa, a forgotten victim. Africa is a region that most geopolitical coverage of this war completely ignores. It should not be ignored. Africa is already the most economically vulnerable continent on Earth. Many African nations depend on food and energy imports to sustain their populations. Imports that travel through the same global supply chains this war is destroying. The worst-case scenario that serious economists and food security experts are already warning about is not food price increases. It is not food shortages. It is famine. Real famine. When global food supply chains break down, when fertilizer becomes unaffordable, when diesel prices make transporting food prohibitively expensive, the nations that suffer most are the ones with the least economic cushion to absorb those shocks. Africa has the least cushion of any region on Earth. The bombs are falling on Iran. The hunger could arrive in Africa. India and Pakistan caught in the middle. India imports approximately 60% of its oil from the GCC. For years, India has been positioning itself as the world's next great economic power, the fastest growing large economy. The alternative manufacturing-based global businesses are building supply chains around. That positioning was working. But now, with 60% of its energy exposed to this disruption, India faces a critical challenge at exactly the moment it was ready to step into a larger global role. India's potential is not destroyed, but this war could delay its fulfillment by a decade. Pakistan is in an even more difficult position. Pakistan's economy was already under severe stress before this war began. Energy shortages are now arriving on top of existing economic problems. For ordinary Pakistani families, the impact of this war is hitting at the worst possible time. The GCC, the biggest loser nobody expected here, is the most surprising economic story of this entire war. The biggest loser is not Iran. Iran is being devastated militarily, its infrastructure destroyed, its economy collapsing. But the biggest economic loser of this war is the GCC, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain. And here is why. The GCC nations built themselves on a mirage. The Gulf is a vast, waterless desert with almost no agriculture, no fresh water, and no natural capacity to sustain a large modern population. Under normal circumstances, it could support a small population living simply. But then came the petrodollar and American military protection. Suddenly, these desert nations had unlimited financial resources, desalination plants, air-conditioned cities, millions of imported workers, airports, shopping malls, financial centers. Dubai became the safe, cosmopolitan, tax-friendly capital of the Middle East, a place wealthy people from around the world wanted to live and invest. But mirages are built on illusion. And once the illusion is shattered, the mirage evaporates. A few drone strikes, some missile attacks on oil facilities, and the entire image of safety the GCC spent decades and trillions constructing is gone. Wealthy residents ask, is this really safe? Investors ask, is this really stable? When they arrive at no, they leave and do not come back. The idea of Dubai competing with London and Singapore as a global financial capital is gone. Regardless of when a ceasefire comes, the GCC will never fully recover the confidence this war has destroyed. Conclusion: the New World Southeast Asia is already running out of fuel. China, despite its apparent strength, is least prepared for expensive energy. America is best positioned, but its petrodollar dependency is a real vulnerability. Africa faces the gravest humanitarian danger. Famine is not a distant scenario. India's economic moment has been significantly complicated. Pakistan is absorbing shocks it cannot afford. And the GCC, built on petrodollar wealth and American military protection, are the biggest economic losers of this war. The cheap energy world is ending. Global free trade is fracturing. American military protection is fading. In their place, a new order is emerging where the nations with their own resources, their own energy, their own food, their own supply chains, survive and thrive. The nations that depended on cheap imported everything face a painful and prolonged adjustment. The reorientation is not coming. It is already here. The only question left is whether your country, and whether you personally, are ready for it.